Thank you for joining us today. We're going to go over the many components of the continuum of care, or a CoC, as an introductory web series. This is Session 1, Defining a CoC. This PowerPoint presentation is an overview of the continuum of care, specifically highlighting Southern Tier Homeless Coalition CoC, which covers Broome, Chenango, Cortland, Delaware, Otsego, and Tioga counties. If you are a new member of the CoC or a community stakeholder who wants to learn more, we hope to provide you with the basics that you'll need to know. This presentation was developed by CARES of New York, Inc., and in collaboration with the Regional Racial Justice Advisory Committee. Let's do a quick overview of our objectives for today's session. First, let's start with the overall series goal, and that is to provide a high-level overview of what a continuum of care is to encourage new membership and additional collaborations in the effort to end homelessness. And today's session goal, we're going to be reviewing what is a CoC, who's part of a CoC, your planning body's name, the key roles of the planning body, executing those key roles, CoC-funded programs, the HUD Homeless Definition, and racial disparities in your continuum of care. What is a continuum of care, or a CoC? Well, the acronym refers to both a federal funding stream through HUD, Housing and Urban Development, and it refers to a planning body. The CoC program funding is dedicated funds for homeless housing and services. And we'll get into the details of the CoC funding categories later in this presentation. And then there's the CoC planning body, which is made up of members, board leaders, and committees. The planning body makes decisions about local CoC funding for homeless programs, and it coordinates the available housing opportunities and support services for folks experiencing homelessness within the CoC's specified geographic area. Who is part of the CoC planning body? Well, ideally, CoC membership should include community advocates, local faith-based community members, local and or state government officials, emergency response and healthcare providers, emergency housing providers and nonprofits, and most importantly, people with lived experience. CoC planning body name: Southern Tier Homeless Coalition, STHC. This is the name that the CoC has provided to HUD as the name that identifies their geographic area and its planning body. To the right, you can see the full geographic coverage area for STHC, spanning 6 counties, including Broome, Chenango, Cortland, Delaware, Otsego, and Tioga counties. STHC and CoC are acronyms that refer to the same thing, the planning body, and they are often used interchangeably. During CoC meetings, acronyms are utilized frequently. This information will prepare you for the various acronyms you will hear and utilize as a member of the CoC. Key roles of a CoC: to prevent and end homelessness, oversee the Homeless Management Information System, HMIS, and oversee the Coordinated Entry System. As you conduct these roles, you'll ensure that the homeless response system is racially equitable. And how will you do that? You'll do that by reviewing your coordinated entry, intake forms, and training modules. You'll review program data by race. You'll review scoring, priorities, and wait times for your coordinated entry programs. Now we'll explain how the CoC executes its key roles. First, how does it execute the key role of preventing and ending homelessness? It reviews and plans with the HMIS and CE data to ensure it has an efficient and equitable system. Next, It develops standards to operate CoC-funded programs and develops an action plan to prevent and end homelessness. And last, it ensures the submission of its annual CoC program funding application to HUD. Next, we'll review how the CoC executes its other key roles of overseeing HMIS and CE. First, you establish a Memorandum of Understanding, or an MOU, between an agency that provides service, e.g. the lead agency, and the CoC. You develop a committee of the CoC to work with that lead agency. And lastly, the CoC should be monitoring the work of that lead agency. CoC-funded programs. As we mentioned earlier in the presentation, CoC funding allows for nonprofits to develop programs within these 4 categories: permanent supportive housing, PSH, rapid rehousing, RRH, transitional housing, TH, and support services only, SSO. Permanent supportive housing is a permanently affordable housing unit that is paired with support services. These units are dedicated to persons with physical or mental disabilities who are experiencing homelessness. To get access to these units, a household must complete a coordinated entry intake with a local human service provider. PSH projects can either be site-based, which refers to the homeless service provider owning and operating a building that's dedicated to persons who were previously homeless, or it's tenant-based, which means that the household experiencing homelessness could receive a rental voucher that goes towards a portion of their rent at an apartment of their choosing and is operated by a private landlord. Rapid rehousing is a program that provides relocation services and rental assistance through a voucher, all in an effort to rapidly transition people out of shelter and into potentially permanent housing. The program assists folks in their housing search process and helps them secure a unit with security deposit assistance and coordinating with the landlord. An important thing to note here is that when you are in the rapid rehousing program, you retain your homeless status, which is important because this means your household is able to remain on the coordinated entry list, and if a PSH unit becomes available, you can still be considered for the opening. Rapid rehousing and transitional housing, which we'll get into next, are intended to be short-term to medium-term solutions to literal homelessness. They can lead to other permanent housing opportunities other than PSH, but ideally they're going to be able to transition into the best housing option for their household. Transitional housing are physical units for folks experiencing homelessness to stay while they gain long-term housing stability through the support services offered there. Again, within this program, the household retains its homeless status and stays on the coordinated entry list so that they can still be considered for a PSH opening. Lastly, support services only, or SSO, refers to when case managers conduct outreach to sheltered and unsheltered persons experiencing homelessness, meaning that they could be in a shelter or on the street or in their car, for example. And the case manager is working to link those households with housing opportunities or other necessary services and provide ongoing support to help them retain housing stability. HUD Homeless Definition. HUD has defined homelessness within 4 categories: literally homeless, imminent risk of homelessness, homeless under other federal statutes, and fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. For clarity, the literally homeless status refers to someone living in a place not meant for human habitation, like the street or an encampment or their car, or someone who's living in a privately or publicly operated shelter. The overrepresentation of Black and Brown, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC, in our homeless response system. The graph on this slide is depicting data from our homeless system and from the census. This data comparison provides insight into the races that are represented in your general community versus those who are showing up in your homeless programs. As you can see, the red bar represents the homeless population in the STHC CoC area, and the yellow bar represents the general population for the counties represented within STHC. Looking at the top two data points on the graph, white, non-Latino people make up 88% of the general population and 60% of the population experiencing homelessness, whereas Black or African American people make up 4% of the general population, but make up 25% of those experiencing homelessness in the 511 CoC area. This shows an overrepresentation of Black or African American persons in our homeless system and can be in large part attributed to systematic racism. When a CoC is working to address their system's racial disparities, then they are holistically improving their homeless system's response. Upcoming sessions of our CoC 101 web series. Session 2, CoC Structure and Leadership. Session 3, Membership Roles and Benefits. Session 4, Operating a CoC. Session 5, Committee Responsibilities and Mission Statements. We'll see you at Session 2.